Hello, and welcome to the final episode of Call to Reform. I am Austin, and I am here with all the other people that you may have listened to in the previous episodes. The main purpose of this final episode is to give a recap of the previous episodes along with the main theme that we have identified from these episodes. And that main theme was that all these interviewees have recognized that there is a problem within public education, yet they don't know how to deal with it or how to address it. Anyone have anything that they want to add to that?
I mean, I don't know. I think it's a hard topic because as you know, I spoke to Mr. Horner and I spoke to Mrs. Stewart, and we're talking about educators here that are very passionate about what they do, and they're very passionate about the people that they serve, and I have a lot of respect for that. But I think these people, they're doing the best that they can with what they have, because we've said before, we said it in even this class multiple times, like when you're a teacher you don't have as much power as maybe your students think you do compared to the higher ups in the state and that kind of thing. And so I personally think that they are doing the best that they can, all the people we've interviewed, with the resources that they have. But something does have to change, and it's not gonna, we all have an impact and we all have a voice, and that's all extremely important, but they have to listen up above us, or it's really not it's gonna fall apart. Because even when you look into it research wise on edweek.org, for example, they wrote an article on why school reform is so difficult, because everyone's always talking about we have to fix this, why is nothing changing? They said, and I quote, "Part of the reason that education reform is so hard is because the system was never designed to do what we ask it to do today." Meaning, and at least this is the way I interpreted it, we have to completely reform from foundation up the way that we run our schools and the way that we look towards teachers to help our students. Because we can't be using the same methods that we use, as Mrs. Stewart even said in our interview, back in the 1900s, early ages. It's not, times aren't the same anymore, technology isn't the same, schools aren't the same, students are changing. We need to talk about that more, and our teachers are doing the best they can with what they have, but we need more resources.
And that's something Marissa and I actually talked about in our episode. We said teachers need to diverge from strictly going on the roadmap, taking the highway on the Common Core. It doesn't work for every student. They need to branch out beyond that. They need to appeal to their students' specific needs, whether that be breaking the sort of standard or the totem, I guess, is how I would say it.
And to go off what you just said, Lucas, I did some research. An author named Mark Phillips wrote an article, Students' Voices in School Reform, had a suggestion that was pretty easy, and it was to create small groups of student representatives in every class so that those representatives could talk to the teachers and tell them what they think is best for their class for them to learn.
So referring back to Zara, with your feelings and everything that you've learned so far, what are you learning about yourself to become an aspiring teacher and use this information later on?
Great question. I'm definitely trying to gather all the information that I can, and these interviews really did help because it enlightened me to the reality that teachers, they're kind of going through it, they're really going through it. And when you do have enough people though that care and come together, it really does create an impact. And I think that what I want to carry with me when I go into the education field is that, be the person that cares, be the person that uses their voice and uses every single tool in their tool belt to help the people that you're serving. Because if you can't do that, you shouldn't be in this field. It's not going to work. Times are changing and people have to be aware of that. I also learned I need to educate myself more, because if you stay stagnant and you don't continue growing and changing with the people you're serving, you're not going to have a fun time. You're wasting your time, really.
I love that. I love how you touched on educating yourself, because I feel like right now we can only do so much before we are thrown into the field of education, but it makes us realize all these issues that are going on. Doing this podcast of education reform, I think we want to be able to make that difference, and that's why we went into the education field to begin with. But with that, you can't be afraid to stick up for yourself, stick up for what you believe in, stick up for kind of your morals and your values. And if you have to walk away from something that you love as hard as it is, like we've learned about it in class, I think that it's going to be very beneficial to even the people that you teach. If you stay true to who you are and want to make a difference in this world, of course it like starts with like little steps at a time. But I think that's very important as we educate ourselves, as to stick up for what we believe in.
Yeah, I agree with everything you guys said, and I want to bring up a new point. So while I appreciate and value so much everybody that we interviewed and their opinions and what they thought, I still want to critique them, because that's something very important that we have to do as educators, is constantly critiquing and constantly seeing what we can do better. So something that I saw throughout all the interviews was that I noticed that some of them, more than a handful of them, kind of had this, like, had to say that it's kind of out of their hands. Like, I would love to reform, but I don't have the power to. So what do you guys think about that?
I mean, I understand, like, feeling kind of shitty about that response, excuse my language, but I really do believe it. Like, these educators, like I said earlier, they are using every tool in their tool belt, at least most of them are, and, you know, it really does kind of fall onto the state, because I remember when I was talking to high school teacher Mr. Horner about this reform whole project and the interview and everything, he said a lot about how in the past years they have made some small steps to change, but then we always end up resorting back and kind of falling back, and I don't know. I mean, I don't know.
It's the whole moment versus movement thing, I think.
Yeah.
And like something that I found actually that happened fairly recently is, as far as just the continuum of not being able to appreciate teachers and just the continuous racial issue in education. A school district in Southern Ohio actually did not hire a black substitute teacher because of the color of her skin. The school board had all white board members, and her being a black substitute teacher ran for the school board, got denied, and they banned her from teaching in this particular school district. They didn't really give her an explanation why. They just said that it's our choice and we're not going to talk about it, and just kind of swept it under the rug. And I feel like there are a lot of issues that are going on today that is why we have this reform project now. It's like there's so much that we don't think about and so much that we are educated on. So like everyone kind of said, like I'm glad that we're continuously learning about education and about what's going on in schools. So with that being said, I have a question for everyone. What role do you play in promoting democratic ideas in school? So not only now, but just in the future, what role do you guys play?
In the future, I think, as we talked about in our class, we kind of talked about how you can't do it alone. You know, if you were to storm into the principal or like into a leader's office and demand reform alone, you would probably be fired for, quote, unknown reasons, quote, you know? So I think it's important moving forward to kind of unify teachers who want to see that reform, and that's kind of something I want to keep in mind the more, like, when I start, you know, educating in field.
You know, oops, sorry about that, but like going off that, it's that we as teachers and aspiring teachers in general, we have probably the most important job in the entire world. We're training, preparing these young students for a future. We're preparing them for the future, and
We're shaping the future.
Yeah, we're shaping the future for them, and if they don't know the democratic ideals and albeit not all the places in the world appreciate that. But I feel as though it is our civic duty to be able to promote these ideas and to prepare these students to be the best citizens that they can be, no matter what.
Completely agree. I think that a really great way as well to kind of promote democratic ideals and stuff in the schools. I think on my end, I would love, like at the school that I'm teaching at, to have just a area or a scheduled meeting time or a scheduled group, I guess, of students that like we can like listen to these students and we can like vocalize for them their requests and their needs and stuff for their schools, because it's important. They're the ones being taught, and like yes, we're not going to know everything as teachers. We're not going to know. We have to listen to other voices, and I think it's really important to just kind of not count anyone out, I guess. Make sure everyone's heard. Make sure everyone has a voice in the matter, because this is a big deal. Like you said, Austin, this is like, we are shaping, or we are helping to shape the future generations, and I don't think that's something that we should take lightly. And it's kind of sad that there are educators out there that do take that very lightly, but it shouldn't be something like that. Yeah. And I think, this is off topic, I think of the quote from the Lorax, unless someone like you cares a whole awful lot, nothing is going to get better. It's not. And I kind of apply that a lot to how I view teaching. Unless someone like you cares a whole awful lot, nothing's going to get better. You gotta, I don't know.
There has to be a lot of people that care.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
I feel like teachers, growing up, a lot of my teachers, they were always just like, you can make a difference. You can change the world. And, like, I still don't know what I'm doing with my life completely. And I feel like, as educators, we need to, like, I love your idea of setting that time aside, meeting with students, getting their opinions and their voices, because you have to start small. You have to start somewhere in order to make a big impact. Like, you have to live and learn and make mistakes, go through things, trial and error. Like, there's no perfect age to start making a difference. So, like, what a better place to do that than, like, in the school that you're actually learning from. And I feel like telling your kids, yes, you can make a difference, that's just a moment of your time. But, like, taking the extra step, getting that involvement, that's what's going to start that movement.
For sure.
So I actually kind of love that, because our takeaway from all of the interviews that we did is that people know that there needs to be reform. People know that we need to do this, but they don't know where to start. So to pull that in, just start small. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like just work within, like for teachers right now, just work within your schools, see what you can do. And if that doesn't work, then just do it in your classroom. Try and see what you can do there to potentially create reform. And then if it works out well, try and get it into other classrooms within that school. And then once that starts working, if it does, go to the just general administration and then have them try it out in all the schools. And then if it works, have the administration go to the state. It trickles down. I shouldn't say trickle down. It builds up from the bottom. The classroom is probably the most important place for reform to take place. That's where it all should start. And that's the key thing that needs to be thought of when it comes to reform in general, is that it does not start all the way at the top. It starts at the classrooms.
It may be easier to make the change from the top, but
it won't be effective.
Mm-hmm.
It won't be what you need to change.
Yes, for sure, because you're not getting those voices.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because reform is not clear cut. It's not a cookie cutter idea. Each school, each district, each population alone has their own different needs that they need. So you can't easily just copy and paste the same reform system all the way across every single state, every single district, all that. Mm-hmm. And that's one of the key failings of No Child Left Behind, in my opinion, is that it does not work.
Mm-hmm. Each student comes from a different background, and we just have to be, what Zara and I found out in our episode, is just like being empathetic when you're thinking of reform. Everyone has a different story. No child should be left behind. You have to, I like that you said the word cookie cutter, because it really emphasizes that, each place is different.
Yeah. I also like, this kind of connects back to the idea of equity versus equality. You can't, with equality, that's giving that child, every child gets the same exact, like resources, same exact way of learning, when really like that's an old method that doesn't work anymore. Children are different from one another. You can't give, you know, Jimmy the same resources that you give Susie if Jimmy and Susie have two totally different needs. It doesn't work. And equity, like that's so important in classrooms, and something that we really do just need to just remember alongside of, you know, our reform process.
Yeah, no, going off that, what you said, Zara, essentially paint the idea that, let's say I need 3 books in order to understand a topic, yet Zara only needs 1, yet I have to go through many extra steps in order to actually obtain those resources, compared to Zara, who most likely would just get the textbook from the teacher, class, whatever, and they don't need to do much with it.
Yeah.
Thus making it much harder for actual equity, because schools now are prioritizing equality, just everyone gets the same education, boom, problem solved. Instead of actually dealing with what is actually going on, it's not solving a problem, it's creating more problems. I think that's the key thing that education reform is now, is that it's not actual reform, it's that it's actually just creating more problems.
Right. And it's hard. I mean, shit, I'll give it to them. It's a hard thing to look at every single individual person you are serving and try to meet a need. It's, you know, really extremely difficult task to do. And unless you have everyone on board that cares just as much, it's going to be like even more hard. So I don't, you know, it's a whole thing, really.
Yeah. I mean, like, you're serving so many people as a teacher. You're not serving just the students. I mean, they are a big key of it, but you're serving them. You're, like, the parents are trusting you with their kids, and then you have supervisors and the principals, and then, like,
The community.
yeah, the community, like, the government. Like, you have so much that's, like, relying on you. And I feel like that's, like, a hard stressor for the teachers.
But unless you have people that care,
Yes.
it's not going to work. You got to have people that care. You have to hire educators that give a damn about their students.
And that's one of the things I wanted to say. Being a teacher is not finding the ideal student and cherishing them. It's realizing every student is different and embracing that instead of pushing it away, saying, oh, you come from a broken home, you're not going to be anything. Oh, you're black or brown, you're not going to be anything. You got to embrace those differences. You got to cherish them. You got to make them feel valuable. And like you said, Zara, it's hard. It is the hardest job in the world, arguably. And there's teachers that spend their whole careers trying to make a difference, trying to do just that, validate every one of their students.
Yeah.
Yeah, one thing I also want to talk about, too, is that for aspiring teachers and just teachers in general as well, if you're in it for the money, get the fuck out of the profession.
Yeah.
Get out. It's not for you. You're part of the problem that...
Won't make it.
Yeah, you will not make it. You're part of the problem. If you actually want to cause change and want to change students' lives, like how a proper teacher should, then you are in the right profession. But if you're only in it for the money, you go find something else. Go be a business major or something. Who cares? Go do that.
If you're looking for a money kind of job, you're in the wrong field altogether. Like,
Yeah, altogether,
really,
honestly.
like, you missed the mark, my friend.
This is definitely a job that requires passion. It's definitely like, this has to be your
It's a
thing.
calling.
It's a
Yeah.
calling. It's so much more than just your job, than where you get your money from. It's your passion. It's your calling.
Absolutely.
And it's not something that's like, okay, here's a play-by-play of how your day's going to go. This is what task you're going to perform at this time. Your lesson plans are going to get thrown off. Like, as a teacher, I know I'm going to mess up, and I know I'm going to make mistakes, and I know there's going to be issues, like, with parents, and I'm going to have to learn how to, like, overcome it. Like,
So many obstacles.
so many generations of teaching, and I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen in our lives, but, like, I know that, I mean, it's awesome being in this room with people who want to make a change, like, for real. And I love this class. This is probably my only class where I've gotten to be this openly passionate about what I want to do, because, like, I have people that feel the same way. Like, we all have the same hearts, and I feel like that is super important. Like, when I have kids one day, I want to send them to you guys.
Ditto. Any last remarks?
I absolutely agree with what everyone is saying. My opinion on this whole topic that we are doing interviews on, I think that especially for teachers, it is very difficult for a teacher to make everyone happy, such as following the curriculum and doing what's best for the kids, like I talked about in my episode, that each kid has a different way of learning and teachers have to go by a set curriculum. And I think that's difficult because some kids may not do good with learning in that curriculum as of other kids would. And I think it's difficult for teachers because they have to follow that curriculum because that is what they were told. And so it makes it hard for teachers. And honestly, ever since this podcast, I didn't really necessarily look into it as much and know that. And I'm glad that now I'm educated on it and know more about that. And I think that even students that were interviewed, their opinions on how that teachers should be more involved in looking at the teacher's part, which I'm glad that I got to hear all about this because as going into the teaching field, now I get to be more educated for when I'm a teacher on what I can do better and what I can focus more on.
Wow, I think we nailed it.
Yeah, I think we're good.
Thank you so much for all of our listeners for coming out here and listening to us today. Once again, this is the podcast Call to Reform. I'm Zara.
I'm Ashley.
Jada.
I'm Lucas.
I'm Austin.
Krista.
And Samantha.